Well, now I'm going to try and hold this steady and show you what I've got here. This is a gunmetal trench watch. It was made probably about 1915. It may be slightly older, and what I'm going to do is turn it upside down so you can see the inside. That's the inside of the movement. I'm sorry it's probably a little bit dark. Let's try and get a bit more light on it. That's the movement, and as you can see it's ticking away. It's a Swiss movement. It says that it is no jewels, it says on it, but there are 2 jewels and a metal balance cap on the end. And sorry about the waviness, it's just a little bit hard to do. This is a pin set movement, cylinder escapement, gunmetal trench watch. Trench watches should be typically between 30 and 35 millimeters. A number of people are selling watches as trench watches, 20 odd millimeter, 25, no, 26. No, they were women's watches, and people are being conned. Most of the early military watches were either gunmetal or silver. They certainly would have never have been gold, because people wouldn't have bought gold watches, they were too expensive. As you can see, it's the balance wheel's going. It's a bit, the balance wheel hasn't got a great deal of amplitude, and this is due to being a cylinder. I've done an oil service. The movement was quite clean, so I just cleaned the plates, cleaned the holes using a very sharp cocktail stick. We oiled it front and back. All I got to do now is oil that balance jewel, and the way I'm going to do it is try to lift up the balance wheel cock and put a bit on the end of the staff without having to take it apart. The reason why this is a very delicate, very old watch, it's probably over 100 years old, and it's going, and they're very easy to destroy the balance wheel, to destroy the escapement, and to break the pivots. They're very brittle. So if they're going, it won't be wound up very often. There was a couple of wheels I couldn't oil because that meant I had to take the watch right apart to do it. But since it's only going to get used probably a couple of times a year, or maybe a couple of weeks a year, on and off, because it's just too rare and too fragile to wear as an everyday watch. I wouldn't do that anyway. I'm looking to bid on another one on eBay at some point. It's very difficult to get them without the faces broken, or the movements broken, or the balance wheel is shot, or the hands are missing. This one cost me £60, or as I call it, Chez Shenzi. What I'm going to do is turn it up now so you can actually see the inside of the case back. As you can see, there's a little bit of glare on that face. There's the face. There's a tiny little bit of rust on the minute hand. I actually used a cotton swab in lighter fuel to get the rust off, and a very light oil on the cotton swab to treat the rust. Eventually I'm going to have this watch maybe professionally serviced and the hand reboot. I don't know what I'm going to do. The other thing is the winder was loose, kept falling out, so I had to try and screw it up. And the only way I could do it is make an old screwdriver, jeweler's screwdriver, and make it to fit the screw, because the screw was worn. And I've managed to get that screw a bit tighter. In fact, I put another turn on it, which means now the winder doesn't fall out. It's a bit loose in certain places where it's travel, but it's not going to fall out anymore. I tested that. And it's now going to run now for 24 hours, and then it's going to have that top. What I'm going to try and do is remove, if I show you, sorry about the camera's disfocusing, what I'm going to do is remove, you can see how small it is just by that, this balance bridge here, gently turning the cock that way round so the spring opens up slightly, and I should be able to get a fine oiler or a very fine needle and put some very light oil on that pivot, watch oil or very light oil on the pivot, or as I call it, the pivot, and then that should make that run, that wheel maybe run a little bit freer. I've oiled everything bar that one, because what it is, I want to make sure that I'm in a good mood and a good state before I mess around with that, because I don't want, it's a bit like a pack of cards. You don't want to break that, otherwise I'm going to look very silly. There was very little rust in the case. Now the way I get rust out of something is lighter fuel. The other thing that can get rust out of things, believe it or not, is that sillet bang on a bit of an end of a cotton swab. But do not do anything that's got paint on it or it's blued, because it will come off. And I cleaned those little screws with that on a cotton bud, and they were blue, but they're not now. So that was a mistake on my part. So only use that stuff for cleaning the plates. Do not use it for cleaning anything else, and put it on a cotton swab and just rub it lightly up and down. This watch was tarnished, but actually it was very clean. And it looked as though it had been serviced in the not too distant past. There was a date 69 on there, and my suggestion is it was serviced probably about 69, that date maybe, and then it just sat in a drawer. It was never used because nothing was dirty. And so all I've done is re-oil it, as I say, clean the pivots and put it back together. And all I'm doing now is a 24-hour test, oil that one jewel, and see if that regulator can be adjusted back towards the scale. If you notice, the regulator is right on the end of the plate onto the slowest. Very often that means the amplitude of the balance was a bit weak. So by putting that bit of oil on, I might be able to back up that regulator back towards the middle again. But it's a very early wristwatch, one of the very first examples of a wristwatch. They did do transition watches where the 12 was at the winder. I had one of those. It was a gunmetal transition watch, very early, and I bought it and took it apart, and the hairspring was slightly bent. But what actually happened, I lost a couple of small bits, and nothing much I couldn't replace. But I think in the end, when I moved to Wales for 6 weeks, when my house was being restored, I think it must have got thrown away, because I've not been able to find it since, and I've had a good look for it. I don't expect I'll ever see another one of those either. The face wasn't cracked, it was all there. It just needed the hairspring straightening. It was slightly bent, and cleaning, and it would have been a good one. So I'm really quite annoyed over that one. Anyway, this is a very early gunmetal watch from, I would call it, the first half of the First World War. And the reason why I say that is the first half of the First World War, watches were not loomed. In other words, they had no luminous paint on. After that, they were luminous, and I think they started looming them in 1916. So I reckon this is probably about 1914, 1915. I would say this watch was probably made about 1915 to be safe. And so there you are. And it's a pin set. You can't pull the winder out. You have to push a nail into a little groove on the side of the watch and revolve the winder to move the hands. So this one was £60 and quite a lot of hours checking it through and trying to make it presentable. It has 12mm lugs. That's another thing of a trench watch. The smallest are 12mm lugs. Round about, if they were smaller than that, and they have very fancy dials or cases that got chasing and all different impressions on it. They were generally women's watches. Women wore watches way before men did. Wrist watches was considered feminine. It wasn't until the First World War men started to wear wristwatches, and this one's a really early example. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy looking at this watch. There's no jewels apart from 2 jewels on the balance. Obviously very, very primitive. In fact, very, very rare you ever get one of these going. And this one seems to be in good working order at the moment. Let's hope I don't mess it up. Anyway, bye bye and enjoy my video, or as I call it, my video.